We knew that the UEFA versus Super League judgment was going to come out today. What we did not know is that it would be so seismic, or so it first appeared.
That's right.
Basically, the key finding here, and all right, take a step back, but essentially this whole proceeding takes forever. It took forever. The Attorney General came out and gave out a view like a long time ago, like 6 months ago. Now we have the final verdict, the final written reasons, the final judgment, I guess. And this judgment says that UEFA have abused their position, UEFA and FIFA, as organizers, because they organize European competitions and also they regulate them. This case was brought by an entity called A22, which is linked to the original Super League members.
That's right.
Real Madrid and Barcelona were kind of the two clubs that were left in it, at least publicly. They brought this case. They're originally in Madrid, then it went to the European Court of Justice. And on the surface, the headline is undoubtedly that they won.
Yeah, it feels like a little victory, certainly for the Super League, for especially the two clubs, the two main clubs still left in it, Barcelona and Real Madrid, and their presidents, Florentino Perez and Joan Laporta, in the sense that it looks like, and certainly what the European Court is saying is like basically the way that UEFA and FIFA blocked the Super League project was unlawful. They were not allowed to do that. The way that the rules that they have relating to accepting other competitions is just not, it's not right.
So that is the headline, and that was in because they released something called the executive summary right in the morning, and it makes it pretty clear that that's what they found. But then you have the actual judgment, and again, you know my thoughts on lawyers and legalese. It's very long, and already when you speak to the two sides, to A22 and to UEFA, they're both putting a real spin on this because one of the arguments that they're making is saying, okay, so UEFA can't pre-approve a league. They can't say, oh, no, you can't do this league, or you have to come to us for approval if you want to start a new competition, right? But in fact, what they're saying is their system for providing pre-approval is wrong and is illegal.
Yeah.
UEFA have since introduced a new system in 2022, for example, which wasn't considered by this court because this court moves in slow motion. Does this mean that UEFA still have the power? That's not clear to me, and I think we'll then have further test cases to interpret this, or until the legal scholars can come out and tell us what's up with this. But the other thing, which I think fans want to know, is does this mean that tomorrow, we're back to April 2021, and we're going to have this massive Super League?
Yeah. The
answer is probably we won't, because in a number of countries, in England and in Italy, I'm not sure about what the situation is like in France, but they actually passed legislation where you can't leave, you can't join a league that's not recognized by UEFA without UEFA approval. Yeah. So effectively, if you were to play in this, you would forfeit your right to play in the Premier League, hypothetically. Yeah. That I think can still be challenged. But that again is going to take time.
Yeah, it's a faff.
It's going to go down the road.
So do you actually think that today actually changes something? Really? I know it looks like a small victory for the Super League. People, A22, Florentino Perez, Joan Laporta, blah, blah, blah. But do you actually think that it's that big, what is happening today?
It's hard to tell, frankly, because of the legal intricacies. But no, I don't think this is like the Bosman case at all. Okay. The idea with UEFA abusing their monopoly situation because they are regulators and they are competition organizers at the same time, I think that's out there. And I think we knew that it was heading in that direction. The question is there a specificity of sport? Is there something within that tells us, well, wait a minute, sport is different. This is not a normal business. To what degree would they go down that road? That is what we didn't know. And I think that part is still open to interpretation. Yeah. In nuts and bolts, UEFA's new approval system that they introduced in 2022 is that compliant with European law?
Because the court also said today that their judgment doesn't mean that a competition such as the Super League project must necessarily be approved. So they're just saying, listen, we think that UEFA abused their position of dominant
and they need to revise their system.
Yeah.
All right. So Jules, and I apologize if and to our viewers as well, if we can't give you cold hard answers. I almost wonder.
I don't think there are any.
If it's by design.
Yeah. I think you've explained really well, Gab, what this means, how we are in this process that's going to be long anyway. I mean, Real Madrid and A22, Barca can say that, we've won, football is free, all of that. I think we all know that this is a little bit misleading and that it's far more complex than just thinking like, okay, now the Super League is back on track, this is what we're going to do. And they've put actually on paper a format of what the Super League would look like now, which we can go into more details. But there's still a lot of hurdles, right?
There's a ton of hurdles. What's interesting about the format that they put on paper, and essentially, it's. I know you have some details there, Jules.
Yeah, because because you told me, so I wrote it down.
But you would have a first division.
Yeah, star tier.
The star tier.
For the stars, I guess.
Yeah. Then you have a second division, which is called the Gold League.
Yeah, for the gold teams.
Which those two both have 16 teams. And there's a third division called the Turd League. No, just kidding, being hard. No. It's not. It's called the Blue League.
You're just blue.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, if you fly British Airways, you got sort of,
exactly.
Gold tier, silver tier, blue tier.
Yeah.
But basically the format is in the top tier, in the star tier, you would have the 16 teams split into 2 groups of 8.
Yeah.
And they would play everybody home and away. So you'd have 14 games.
Yeah.
And then the top teams would qualify for an end of season tournament / playoffs. And they think this would be far more exciting and innovative because you would get more matches among the top teams.
Yeah, so you can expect the top 8. For example, the first in the star tier, the 16 clubs would be the 4 best in England, the 4 best in Germany, the 4 best in Spain, 4 in Italy. So that's already 16.
They have to make room for Paris Saint-Germain.
Of course, and PSG.
But and then the interesting thing is, if you're at the bottom, you would get relegated to the gold tier.
Yeah.
And then the gold tier, you get relegated down to the blue tier.
Yeah.
So what I find really interesting is they say that, well, this would make it open to everybody, right? Because nobody would be guaranteed a spot. True, nobody would be guaranteed a spot. But if you're in the star tier and then you'd have to get relegated twice.
To have to requalify, basically, right?
Yeah, and then fall out, and then you would qualify via your domestic competition.
Because you only qualify for the blue tier, right? Through your domestic competition. If you already star or gold, you stay there unless you get relegated, like you said, to the blue, and then again. And
not just that, but in the blue tier, you also have a bunch of teams that have been relegated from the tier before. You have a bunch of teams that have avoided relegation out of. So in reality, I'd love to know how many actual spaces are available every year for somebody qualified via their domestic leagues.
I agree.
I wonder about the impact to the domestic leagues, because right now the race for a top 4 finish is a big deal. If it's not a big deal because, hey, look, I already know I'm in the star tier next year or the gold tier or the blue tier, then how's that going to impact it?
Yeah.
They make a lot of claims about to have games on free television. Like, all of this needs to stand the test of time. But all it seems so far is we've created an alternative format. The approval system, that UEFA can't say no and send us all away.
Yeah.
They have to consider it. There is an approval system that UEFA have in place. This approval system, which was introduced in 2022, may or may not be compliant with European law, and presumably will need to have another long-winded, wasteful trial about whether it is compliant.
Yeah.
But the irony in all this, Jules, and this has been rumored for a long, long time, is that the next evolution of European competition is sort of post the Swiss model, which is coming in next year.
Next season, yeah.
Is some sort of 3-tier thing like this.
But I've said to you from the beginning, from April 2021, when the Super League, we had this earthquake of the Super League, blah, 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 that in the end, It might not be called the Super League, but UEFA will be involved. All those top clubs will be very happy, Florentino and Laporta included. A22 might have a role in this in terms of organization or marketing rights or commercial rights, something like that. And in the end, it will be very similar to this like 3-tier for what the Champions League is now. 3-tier camp, probably the same for the Europa League and maybe the same for the Conference League or something like that. And then everybody would shake hands and be very happy. And we would have done all of that, all this arguing, going back and forth, paying lawyers, your best friends, a fortune to get to a point where actually they all agree that, yeah, you can't do it on your own without UEFA, that UEFA also need all those top clubs. And maybe they need a reformer of their competitions and just to rethink and make it a bit more modern, a bit more energetic, appealing, whatever. And in the end, I'm convinced this is exactly how it's going to finish in 5-6 years time.
Yeah, I also think this idea that it needs to be more modern and innovative and make more money. And so, look, if you're unhappy with UEFA's governance, that's one thing. We can have a discussion. I think there are things to be legitimately unhappy about, right? Legitimately unhappy with that, with the way they enforce their own financial sustainability rules, lack of transparency in certain issues, a whole bunch of things which I think are very legitimate. But to say, oh, well, the Champions League is boring, European competition are boring, I'm like, on what basis do you say that? Do you say this based on the fact that the television rights could be higher? But the reality is television rights are flat or declining everywhere. Look at the Premier League, right? I think they would acknowledge the fact that the Premier League is the most successful football league in the world, maybe the most successful sports league in the world. The NFL might debate that, whatever, it's up there, right? The Champions League revenue, their TV revenue continues to grow. They've expanded it, whatever. I don't know the future is necessarily going to be from old school pay TV subscribers following that old model. Maybe it might be something different. But if you use other metrics like sponsorship, like engagement on social media, all these other things, I think the Champions League is still hugely relevant. It's
but
still
Florentino
hugely
Perez says that the younger generation don't watch whole 90-minute games.
So
which is not true.
Yeah, and then he brings no evidence for this. This is another issue about this, is that, and this is the other irony, right? This 3-tier system that we're talking about, this is a lot like the system that Andrea Agnelli floated back in 2019. Now, at the time, Andrea Agnelli was head of the European Clubs Association. European Clubs Association, by the way, who have come out very squarely on UEFA's side with a statement in the last couple hours. He was negotiating the club's position with UEFA. He introduced this system. He was on the UEFA Executive Committee. I'm not saying he could have definitely passed this if this is what he wanted, but he was in a very strong position to do so.
For sure.
And then what happened? They didn't. And instead he chose to go down the route of the original Super League. I don't know. The climate has changed, Jules.
Yeah.
I think if they can get something out of it, I think it does open the road, maybe, hypothetically. A competition that maybe it opens the road a little bit for cross-border competitions. Like, let's say, if La Liga and Serie A wanted to maybe merge or do some sort of merge tournament, I think they're going to have more latitude to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think there's a massive can of worms, like we said before. Premier League clubs joining, German clubs joining if they even want to.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a long
you can't have a Super League without... If the English clubs really, because of that law that passed, can't join a new competition not approved by UEFA, you can't have a Super League without Bayern Munich, who were not keen in the first place. I mean, PSG maybe not, but PSG were not in because they were with Seferin and UEFA. And then no English clubs? That's not possible.
The thing about after Brexit, obviously English clubs are not bound by the ECJ in the same way that they were bound before. But equally, it's a British law.
Yeah, exactly.
that was passed. And what I find also quite interesting is that as we tape this now, the verdict's been out for just over 3.5 hours. We haven't had one club, other than Real Madrid and Barcelona, come out and say, yippee, this is a great day in European football. I think what will happen is we maybe see a different revenue distribution going forward. We may see a different handling of the commercial and sponsorship contracts. Yeah. Because that's much more of a kind of a business sort of competition law sphere, right?
Yeah.
Where if I'm, say, Paris Saint-Germain is always a bad example of everything. If I'm Barcelona, if I'm Barcelona, right? And let's say UEFA want to go and do a deal with what's a competitor to Spotify, Amazon Music or YouTube Music,
something
right?
like that. Yeah.
I went like, wait a minute, I'm at the Spotify camp now, and you're doing a deal with one of my competitors. How do we sort this out when Barcelona, provide this much? I think these are legitimate questions. I think there should be a legal framework. UEFA would probably say, there already is a legal framework from it. Well, whatever. Maybe we should have clarity on this. Maybe the club should have a bigger say. UEFA have already created a new company where the clubs are, or the ECA are joint shareholders. Maybe you can go further on that. But in terms of clubs suddenly being allowed to do what they want, in terms of there being the appetite, I don't know. Let me ask you this, and let me leave you with this thought. We know all these clubs effectively lied to us the first time around, right?
Yeah.
Right? John W. Henry, liar. Right? He then apologized for it to his credit, right?
Yeah.
Glazers didn't apologize afterwards because they don't like to speak in public, but we know that they all did a 180 and they all pledged to stay, and so did Chelsea and Arsenal. And could they all be lying to us again? Could they all be sitting there and saying, okay, Florentino, like you like playing the role of the bad guy. Laporta, nobody likes you anyway. You guys go ahead, strike a deal that benefits all of us.
And then we're going to background, they're still like.
Yeah. Do we think that?
No.
Do we think that they could come back in?
Anymore. Not now. Not after the backlash from the fans in April 2021. I think it would be a very different. If they were to do it, it would be in a very, very different way than just catch everybody by surprise like they did 2.5 years ago, and just go, hey, this is it. We've all joined this new Super League. Come on board, kind of thing. I don't think that they would do that mistake again.
All right. Time will tell. And again, I'm going to repeat my caveat again. This is complicated. It's a very long judgment. People are saying different things. Maybe they'll find stuff in there that leaves room open. But our early reading of this, there will be some change. But this is not sort of the seismic thing that people were saying it was originally.